when I'm talking about upper bounds and lower bounds in the book, it's just whatever task you take on, whatever goal you set that you think is important, make sure it really is essential, but then have a minimum bound so that you're doing a small amount consistently, but also an upper bound. So you reduce the chances of going big for a day or two, getting exhausted, and then, and then stopping for a while, and then you come back, and that intermittency.
What I realized, and this is going to segue to some of the solutions, is I hit the same wall that you did. I don't have the bandwidth to carry or hold all these rocks, and I want a bigger jar, but if the jar is my calendar, there is no more time. I only get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's my jar, and I don't have room for the rocks. So like you said, it's not a matter of I have to work even harder. I've got to work smarter. How do I make this more effortless? Yep. And one of the things that I want to mention to people that I've said before is that there is no better return on investment on anything on the planet than a book. Because you can get a book for, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 bucks, depending on if you get Kindle or hardcover, whatever it is. And if you read all 200 plus pages and you get nothing out of it but one sentence, it can be worth it. And I shared this with you via email, and I want to kind of give the spoiler to everybody that there's a ton of amazing stuff in Effortless. But I boiled it down to one sentence, and it was the one sentence I needed to hear at exactly that moment in my life. And I've made all kinds of sweeping changes in the way I organize my time and my energy because of this one sentence. Do not do more today than you can fully recover from by tomorrow. Yeah. Boom. Mind blown. I was like, oh my God, this is everything I'm doing wrong. Because like you said, the word that you used earlier was insecure overachiever. Ooh, that one hurt. That was twisting the knife deep, my friend. Because that's me and probably most of the people listening. Insecure overachiever. Whatever I achieve, it's not enough and I got to do more.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, even your description, which I'm not knocking at least half of it. You're saying, well, I'm exhausted every day, but not burned out. And I do agree that with the difference that you're putting on that, if you're motivated in the morning, you do want to be optimally invested. You want to have something you want to wake up for and to give yourself to. And I really relate to that. But if we are actually exhausted every night,
I knew this was coming, by the way. I knew this was coming.
Good. Well, because there's something about that I go, well, is that optimal? And I don't know, because there's a lot in the word exhausted, right? There's a range of meaning. But you already identified the rule that I would be putting to you, but you've got to try and figure that out. Like, yes, have an exception every so often to the rule. Don't do more today than you can fully recover from, by tomorrow. All of us will have exceptions, but as soon as the exception becomes the rule, then there are hidden costs. Then you're going to pay a high price for that, right? Things will burn out. Even things like our ability to see things clearly. So our relationships still work, and our health may be okay in certain ways, but we are foggier in our perception and our discernment when we're running on the edge of exhaustion all the time, when we're teetering right on the edge of it. And so I think that if we can figure out what that line is for us, and then we have to remove, we have to go a little away from it so that there's some buffer for unexpected problems that always come up, and then that becomes your optimal space. So I'm not saying go to zero. I'm never advocating for that. That's not a meaningful life. There's no contribution in sitting in a rocking chair for 30 years and do nothing. I mean, that offers no sense of satisfaction. But if we push it to the point of diminishing returns, then of course we're getting less back for every ounce of effort we put in. But we also risk the higher level of exhaustion, which is negative returns, where every ounce of effort we put in then will make everything in our lives worse. When I'm writing the new book, right, I'm writing Effortless. If I work 2 or 3 hours of concentrated work, but actually that's about optimal. I can't really do much more than that. Really concentrated work, and I actually don't think anyone can. if you push beyond it, if you say, okay, well, I'll do 4 or 5 hours, it's certainly not getting another, an almost doubling of your productivity. No way you're getting a few extra bits of productivity for all that extra investment. If you go to 7, 8 hours, I'm talking on a consistent basis, you will make the manuscript much worse than if you didn't even work on it today. And that's my one example in my own life that I know of, personal experience, but it's true in other things too. So it's about saying, how can I contribute in crescendo? Yes, I like that way of thinking about it. Stephen Covey used that language early on. With me 20 years ago, and he and his daughter were co-authoring a book when he died, and she's just finished it. It isn't coming out yet, but that idea of living life in crescendo. You don't live life in crescendo if you live it on the edge of exhaustion, because you will plateau way before that. And then what I want to do is I want to be able to contribute for the next 40 years, always going up. And so I've got to be very careful to make sure that I manage my mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health in such a way that you can contribute over that kind of length of time. And that's a different orientation.
So then let's talk a little bit more about this idea of how do we find that line? How do we find the upper bound? Because I would say that if there were one thing that could have the most profound impact on the way that I manage my life with all the different rocks and a lot of the other people that are listening that are also the insecure overachievers, if I knew what's that magic number for my upper bound where I'm doing the maximum amount of effort, where I'm actually getting results from it, but I can fully recover by tomorrow, and in the evening I'm like, you know what, I'm tired out, but I don't feel like a bag of dirty laundry. How do you find that for yourself?
I think it's personal to each person, right? Like, I think it takes self-awareness to be aware of that, but it also takes some honesty. A metaphor it's a story, it's a case study that's compelling, is the race to the poles. There's the name of a biography about the final two teams the last two teams to try to get to the South Pole before someone actually achieved it, right? Like, this is right at the edge. No one has ever done it before. Not the whole British Navy in all of its prowess, not all the Vikings for 1,000 years. No one has ever made it there, ever. And people are really excited about who's going to do it. People keep trying, they keep failing. And the two teams that go at the same time, they approach it differently. One team is boom and bust. They're saying, we're going to go to the absolute edge of exhaustion every day that they can. And so on the good weather days, they're going, 40, 50 miles. It's just taking everything out of them. But then the unintended consequence of that was, on the bad weather days, there was hardly anything left in the tank, and certainly not sufficient to be able to be consistent on those days. So they ended up just being trapped in their tents. And that exhausted them and demoralized them. And we're so unlucky. You could sense in their journals their emotional state. And it's bemoaning everything that's happening. No one could make progress in weather like this, they would write. But one team could, and that was the Norwegian team. And over there, the expedition leader had a different rule. And his rule was 15 miles a day. That was the rule. Good weather, you do 15. That's your upper bound. And bad weather, same thing. But because they didn't push to exhaustion on the good weather days, they had sufficient to be able to be consistent on the bad weather days. Well, the plot thickens when they get within like 45 miles of the South Pole. The weather is perfect. The sledding conditions at that point are also perfect and ideal, relatively flat. And they don't even know where the British team, their competitor team, is. So for all they know, the British team is ahead of them. They have no idea. And they can push through one day and get there. What would you do? What would you do? Seriously, right? Zach, what would you do? What would I do? What would everyone participating in this, listening to this do.
Just do it. Just power through, man. Make it happen. We're so close.
All of us would do that. And that is the insecure overachiever speaking. That is the no pain, no gain mantra. And even though I know the end of the story, if I'm honest, I sort of think, well, yeah, that's probably what I would do, or, at least be tempted to do. Well, he doesn't. He says 15 miles a day. He takes 3 days to do the last 45 miles. He arrives there at the South Pole. He has beaten the British team by 30 plus days. And that should get our attention because the idea that pushing to exhaustion, the reason we do that is because we believe that's the fastest way to make progress. That's the way to win. And it isn't. And that's the point, is that actually it is much, much slower. And this example just captures, it's not the whole data, obviously, it's just one case study. But not only is it not what leads to winning, it's also, in this case, led to tragic ends, because the British team, by the time they got to the South Pole, they're burned out, they're exhausted, they're emotionally fatigued. None of them make it out alive, right? They all die on their journey home. The Norwegian team had sufficient resources to make the 16,000-mile trip back to Norway. Well, yeah, if you read the biography, right? When I went back and read that brilliantly written biography, I came across a phrase in it that I think should grab our attention. It'd take a breath away, really. And this is the phrase. He said, the Norwegian team achieved progress and achieved their goal without particular effort. That's the quote. Without particular effort. That's an absurd thing to write. It was the most arduous physical objective, almost conceivable to humanity at that time. And yet he's saying that they made this progress without particular effort. That says something about the false way we think about making progress, the bloodletting approach, and how we need to think differently about it and execute differently about it. And so, when I'm talking about upper bounds and lower bounds in the book, it's just whatever task you take on, whatever goal you set that you think is important, make sure it really is essential, but then have a minimum bound so that you're doing a small amount consistently, but also an upper bound. So you reduce the chances of going big for a day or two, getting exhausted, and then, and then stopping for a while, and then you come back. And that intermittency that is so the human, such human foible, that we're intermittent in our behavior because we don't have an upper bound. We go too big, we get sore physically or emotionally, and we give up for too long. What we want is counterintuitive, but we want an upper bound on it.